Let me share my screen again. So today we're talking about intentional photo editing with Lightroom. Hopefully everyone is attending had that intent, and we appreciate all of those that are attending, and anybody that may be looking at this after the fact. Um, I'm going to go through a couple of things right at the start here before I get into what's Lightroom calls the develop module, where you really do your editing. Um, the I get questions over the years, and there are people that are in the club that are not in the club actually that know that I use Lightroom, and I get questions, and so some of the questions I get, I'm not sure I know the answer, but then I go research it and I learn something. So I thought I'd go over some of the questions that I commonly get. And one of the things that's somewhat confusing about Lightroom is that not understanding how Lightroom works. And Lightroom starts off to be really a database. And hopefully you can see my cursor here, but Lightroom is based on what they call a catalog, which is nothing more than a database. And in this database, you could think of it as like I think of it like the old library catalog files, where you have a catalog card in the file. And so, for instance, in my image here, image 123, it records a very small preview image based on what it found on your disk drive, where you might have pictures, and it records where the file location is, what the develop adjustments are that you might make, crop settings, any keywords you may put into Lightroom, and we'll talk about keywords in a few minutes. The caption you may add to a photo, all that is recorded in the Lightroom catalog. And your original images on your disk are not modified in any way, no matter what. Unlike, if you were to modify a photo in Photoshop, for instance, in order to save the changes, you would have to save the original, a new file, if you would. So you would have two files. You'd have your original file that came out of the camera, and then you'd have your file with your changes. Lightroom handles that by you view the original photo in Lightroom. It shows you your changes. It saves the changes in this database, but it's not really changing anything on your disk. So I've had questions like, I went through Lightroom, I made some development changes, and then I tried to send my image out from my operating system, and there was no changes there. Well, you have to look through Lightroom in order to see your changes. And in order to get a new image with your changes, you have to go through this export process. So you have to export out of Lightroom. What Lightroom does, it goes to its catalog, it finds all your changes you made, it goes to the original picture, pulls that original image in, it adds the changes on the export function, and then it outputs it. Now you have a new file with the changes made. So there seems to be a lot of confusion about that. Are there any questions on that at all? The way Lightroom works. Okay, very good. I'll move on. So one of the things I wanted to show is also I get questioned on is this import process. So I was going to go through that very quickly. You'll see in the so-called library module, you see up in the top right-hand corner, I'm in the library module. And so in the library module, in the so-called grid view, and you can hit the letter G on your keyboard, and you can get to this view anytime in Lightroom. And so in order to go through an import process, All I do, I always handle all photographs through Lightroom. I don't do anything on the operating system whatsoever. All of my photos are organized and brought into my computer through Lightroom. I don't do it through the operating system. So the way to do that is in these so-called import functions. So I put Nancy and I went to O'Galley on Tuesday. I haven't imported those photos yet. So I was going to go through that with you just real briefly. And so I have a memory card in my card reader on my computer. I'm going to hit this import down in the lower left. I'm going to hit import and it brings up a new screen. Maybe. There we go. Brings up a new screen, and the screen you kind of read from left to right. So if you look at the very top left, it says I'm coming from my memory card from my Nikon. So I'm coming from there. And it's important if you have troubles with this where you can't see all the photos you took, it's probably because you don't have this little check mark that says include subfolders. Because if you've ever looked at your memory card before, you have this primary folder and then you may have several subfolders underneath that. So I always leave this checked, always looking for subfolders in anything I import from. So on the left-hand side, we're importing from this memory card, and there in the grid view there, you see all the photos we took. And you look at the very top, it says, I'm going to copy those off the card. In other words, I'm not going to delete them off the card. I'm not going to move them from the card. I'm just going to make a copy of it. And for the sake of speed here, there's some, I can check all or I can uncheck all down at the bottom here, bottom left. And so I'm going to uncheck all, and I'm just going to select a few of these images. So I selected the first one here. I'm holding down the shift key. I'm selecting the others. I'm going to put the check marks only on those. And then I go over to on the right, and it says, where am I going to? So it says I'm going to my data file called drive D. I'm come farther down, and it says apply during import. First of all, one thing to look at is file renaming. You have those flexibility of renaming all the files that are coming off your memory card if you choose to do that. I do not choose to do that. So I am not renaming files as they're coming in, but you have that capability by filling out this little form here, checking rename files. I do apply a couple of things during import. On the develop settings, I apply something called auto lens correction. That's a preset. That's a develop preset. I'll talk about when we get into the develop module. But essentially, I'm applying Lightroom's lens corrections on the way in, based on the lens that was used, and then I apply to the so-called metadata. I apply my copyright. And you can set up your own copyright. You can edit these presets on the metadata. And you notice I have a copyright for me and a copyright for Nancy. And you can change those dates every year, that kind of thing. Or you can not apply any metadata changes if you like. That would be none. But right now I'm going to apply my copyright to the metadata. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to keyword this. This was taken in O'Galley, so I have keywords on O'Galley before, probably. There it is. So I start typing O'Galley, and I have a keyword called O'Galley. And this was a photo walk. So I'm going to, if I could spell it right, photo walk. So these keywords now will be placed on every one of the photos that I bring in, because I've done the keywords. And then the next thing I do is, where do I want to put these? So remember, I'm coming off my memory card. I'm making copies. So now where do I want to put them? Well, you have the choices of importing, which years ago, and I think may still be true. If you bought a new copy of Lightroom, it will want the defaults by date. It tries to bring them into date folders. I've never done that. I've always, and we'll talk about my organization in a minute, but I bring it into one folder. So my selection here is to bring into one folder. And so that drop down, you can bring them in by date, or you can bring them in by folders. I want to put them in by folders. So you can see here's an organization I have. I have a top level folder of 2024 photos, and then I have a whole lot of subject folders I want to bring it in. But I have that option to select 2024, but then look right here, it says I want to put it in a subfolder. Well, this was a new photo walk, a new location, so I'm going to check that, and I'm going to put O'Galley. So now if you see Lightroom is adding a folder to my 2024, and now I'm going to import these images I've selected into the O'Galley folder. So that's really all I have to do. And then I can come down here to the very lower right and I can import. So you can see on my operating system, if I went back to, after I do this import, if I go back to my operating system, I'm going to find this whole list of folders in the operating system, and O'Galley is going to be added to it. So Lightroom can do that. You don't have to do that through the operating system. I've seen so many people get very confused in terms of where their images are, because they use the operating system to try to bring it in, and then they try to figure out where it is in Lightroom in order to get them into Lightroom. And I just I'll let Lightroom do everything. There's one exception to that, and I'll tell you about that, but I just let Lightroom do it. So you can see Lightroom is bringing those images in. It's still working on it up here in the upper left-hand corner. This is it brings them in a grid view, and it says, look where I am. I'm on the previous import. Right, so I've imported 16 images, and here's the 16 images I imported. But look over here on my navigation pane. Here's all my folders on my operating system. It starts with pictures. Starts at 2007. So if I were to open 2007, I only have one folder there. Let's go on down here to 2014. So here's all the different folders I imported in 2014. And if you looked at that latest import, what did we add them into? O'Galley. There's O'Galley with the 16 images. And if you went to your operating system, you're going to find those 16 images on your operating system. Is there any questions about that import function? There's always confusion on this.
I have a quick question. They're in a different order. Is it ordering them differently, or?
Yeah, well, you have that option. This is ordered in capture time. See down at the very bottom here?
Yeah.
I can order this in capture time, added order, edit time, edit count, your ratings, your file name, your file type.
Right.
Anything you
They
want
were in a different order on your card because Nancy was at the top.
Yeah, but that I can order that on the import screen also, Debbie.
Oh, okay.
The same thing. It was.
I never messed with that. Yeah.
Remember, I can do it on capture time. Let's see, this says sort here. I can sort backwards. So there's Nancy at the top.
Okay.
And that's what the import screen is. So I can sort it from Z to A or A to Z. So these are the last photos I took. And that's what I commonly do on an import function. And let me tell you why I do that. Because I import the same way for my Apple, my iPhone. So on my iPhone, I probably have, like everybody else, 250 images, of which I don't want to import all 250 images every single time I plug in my iPhone to do this import. I only want to look at the very latest. And so on my import screen, I set this to capture time and I put Z to A.
Okay.
And that's why that, that order looked different. But I
Okay.
can easily change that on either the import screen or, on this grid view.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. So
Sure.
here's, oh, Galley, remember it defaults coming up here and says previous import. So this is the 16 images that the last imported, which we just did. I can also come down here to Galley. There's the same 16 images. Notice the keywords are already in there. This is in the library module. I'm on the grid view. And notice the keywords are here. So I've got keywords in there. If somebody wanted to see all the images I ever took at Galley, I would just come up here and select all pictures. I would come up here to text. I would come up here to, I want to look for keywords, and I want to show me all the images I ever took in Galley. Here's all the images I ever took in Galley. Oh, I'm on. I evidently put a keyword of EGAD on the rest of them, so here's all the ones I took at EGAD. So you get the feel. So I wanted to talk about this structure here a little bit. Whatever I tell you today, I'm trying to share what I commonly do. It is not necessarily the right way to do things. I am an advocate of anybody that has a different idea of the way they want to structure their folders on their disk drive. Please go ahead and do it. The way I think through things is I think in years, and then in the years, I then have subject matter. So, for instance, I take photos of events for nonprofits. One of them is Promise in Brevard. So here's a folder which I put all the Promise in Brevard events I did that year. And that's how I would do that. I sometimes take space launches. So I will put that in a folder called space launches. So any space launch I do for the whole year goes in there. And notice there's different keywords associated with those so that I can go and search for all of them. And commonly when we go on vacation, like we went to New Zealand this year in January, I'll say, well, here's all my images I took in New Zealand. So that's how I like to organize folders. Any questions about that?
Yeah, I have a question on if you've got file names that are the same coming from your camera. I don't know how you set up your naming for your files, but for mine, every time I reset, the file names will start with the same sequence number. And if you copy them into a common folder, you'll have problems. How do you get around that?
I don't ever have that problem because I never reset the number. And if you will look at, I'm going to do this at random, so I don't know if I'm going to do it, but if you go up here and search, and I'm going to look for file name, and I'm just going to say 1506, you're going to probably find several pictures that are, see, there's 4 pictures here that have a file name that has 1506 in it. Here's a IMG 1506, DSC 1506. Here's another one. This is a JPEG. This is ARW. Here's a 1506. It looks like all of them are, they're not the exact file name. So I never reset the cameras at all. And sometimes they'll repeat, but by the time they repeat, I'm on it probably a different year. So I have never seen that problem. Because I'm importing in a different year, I separate things by year. I don't touch the file name coming in at all.
Okay.
Now, some people like to have information in their file name, either in their name, or if they shot a wedding, they want the wedding name in there or something like that. I never do that. So, but I can see how you might run into that problem. Any other questions? Okay, one of the things that we can also do in organization is develop collections. And you'll notice I put a collection together for today's presentation that's called, it looks like I've done this 3 or 4 times, but the latest one is Lightroom Workshop 2024. So I collected images, just like the name suggests. I've formed a collection from multiple folders that I have, and I dragged and dropped them into this collection. So that's how I have this collection established. And it's really easy to add collections. You just go up here to the collection. This is a navigation pane. This is in the library module. Just click on that little plus sign right there. You add new collections. You can create a collection. You can, create a collection set if you want to put, collection sets together. For instance, I have a collection set of travel. So here's all my collections from travel. And you can put collections, under a folder name, if you will. So there's travel. But today we're going to be working in the collection called, that I've pulled together. Some of those are JPEGs from PowerPoint presentations that we've seen so far. So one of the things I wanted to review was the handout. You can download that from the website. It's, if you didn't already, it's in the email that went out. There's a link that goes to this handout. And this handout just goes through, the flow that I kind of think about when I go through develop module. There's a global develop. We do some sort of global development. We do then some sort of local development. We try to finish up with some details. There are some exceptions where you might start with details and then do this, and I'll talk about those. But what you're trying to do is achieve a vision, and at some point in time, you're trying to present it somehow. And that presentation could be on social media, could be a print, could be a variety of different presentation venues that you may want to develop a vision for, if you would. And one of the things I wanted to point out to you is there's references over here in this handout. These are a couple of great websites that are free. Scott Kelby, of course, you can go to Kelby Training and pay whatever it is nowadays, $129 a year, but he does these Lightroom killer tips for free. You just click on that link, you'll get to it. And then Julianne Cost, who is from Adobe, she has a whole video series of tutorials on the Adobe website. I'll be using some shortcuts today, and a way to get to those shortcuts is the control key plus a / So if you take the control key and do / there's all of you, pops a screen that tells you all about shortcuts. So these are shortcut keystrokes you can use in order to do things without going through the menus. And there's a reference there. You can click anywhere outside the image and you'll go back to normal, if you would. So back to this flow. I think of terms of, where we're trying to do things global and trying to get the whole image into and many of us capture raw files. So a raw file is exactly that, pretty raw. So you want to at least get it into a state where the global file starts off with a negative you want to, or the digital negative and with it you want to start using. Then there's some local things you may want to do in order to deal with either distractions or maybe enhance only certain parts of the image, dodge and burn, for instance. Then there's some, things like sharpening and maybe noise reduction here, although you may be doing some of the noise reduction and spot healing before you actually do the global development. And there's some reasons for that, or at least before you do the local development. So when I say global development, I'm talking about exposure. Is the white balance look like you wanted it in your vision? What's the contrast look like? What's the crop? Fundamentally that kind of thing. So, and before we get into the develop module, there's some things that I try to avoid, and I've seen on other images. There are some, when I've done some photo judging, there's some very specific rules that, we first ask, do you have any rules you want? And twice now, there's been some rules, we don't want to see all these saturated colors. I mean, it was actually written in the rules that way. Oversaturated colors, but whatever that really means, was not something the camera club wanted to be included, as a feature, if you will, in their competitions. But I think we've all seen very oversaturated colored images, especially on social media, where the white balance may be noticeably off color. And when I say off color, sometimes we are trying to be creative and we change the white balance, but when it really looks like it shouldn't be there, sometimes that can be a distraction. Photo looks too crunchy. In Lightroom, things like clarity sliders, dehaze sliders, and over sharpening, you can really make for a real crunchy image. And then if that's your vision, that's fine. But sometimes it just doesn't look right. It also creates halos around the edges when you use too many of these sliders like that. Contrast may be usually too little. Sometimes they're a little too contrasty for my taste, but one of the things you want to make sure of, you at least have some contrast in there so the image doesn't look so flat. Censored dust spots I've seen plenty of times, especially in the skies. And we'll talk about that if you don't know what that means. Distractions that can be easily removed, especially around the edges of images. Improper cropping, meaning, the frame is just not filled properly. And we'll talk about that. And crooked horizons. There's a lot to be said about the dynamics of a Dutch tilt and a tilted image, but if the horizon doesn't look like it was intentionally crooked when you took the picture, that can also be a distraction. Any questions about those? So I'm going to go through a pretty simple image here. One of the things I'm going to do is to make this a little bigger is I'm going to close this left navigation panel. And I can do that by clicking on this little arrow on the left here. So I make the image just a little bit bigger, if you will. So I'm in the develop module. Now I can go from the grid view in the library module right into the develop module just by hitting the letter D. And it goes right in there. So one of the first things, if I'm doing this, I'm going to try to get rid of this top panel too. There we go. So one of the things you can look at, you see that there's a histogram up in the right, upper right, and you can see that there's a lot of darkness. You can see there's blacks and plenty of shadows, but there's not too many whites and highlights up here in the right hand side. And part of that was my intention not to blow out this white ship that I was on a Zodiac taking a picture of the sea cloud for you history buffs, the C-Cloud was built by Margie Merriweather Post and E.F. Hutton back in 1936, I believe the number is. And it has been renovated and is now a cruise ship. But I was worried, we had the sun to our back, and I was worried about blowing out that white ship in that bright sun. So I intentionally underexposed it a little bit, and I probably underexposed it too much. But, you know, that's the first thing I notice is I look at the histogram and I see, you know, it doesn't have many highlights in it, and that can make an image. So what I usually start with when I'm doing this is I start with the whites, and I try to bring the whites up just to try to, and I start someplace, you know, it doesn't have to be exact because we can always change that. And then I always bring the blacks back down. Usually just try to get some contrast in this image. Of course, there's a lot of shadow area in the foreground, so I'm going to bring the shadows up. And if I bring the exposure up some to try to get some of that, I'm starting to lose the ship a little bit, but I can bring the highlights back down. So this is the interaction of these toning sliders here. One thing that can help on a landscape like this where no people are involved is you can put some clarity in the image. It really helps the image pop some, and I would add some texture as well. Some people might add dehaze, but I try to stay away from that quite a bit. And then I go down to the vibrance and saturation slider. Vibrance, think of it as a slider that will add saturation to colors that are not already saturated. So it's kind of a variable. If the color is already saturated, it'll be less effective on that particular color than a color that is not saturated. And of course, saturation just saturates everything. Here's an example of an oversaturated image. You know, you got to be real careful with this saturation slider. I typically don't go above, you know, 4 or 5 even. You may want to add a little saturation to it. One of the things you can look at it looks like to me there's some noise, a little bit of noise in the sky. And that would be under, you know, some finishing. But before I get there, I'm going to put a little contrast in this. I always like to use this tone curve for contrast, and I'm going to bring the darks down ever so slightly, and I'm going to bring the lights up ever so slightly just to put a little more contrast in it. One thing I forgot to do because I purposely took it away here. I normally do this on import. You saw me import lens corrections. That's what it changes these features here. Now I'm going to click on lens correction. Let's see what it does to the image. It does fundamentally 2 things. Notice it takes a little bit of the distortion out. This is on, it looked in the metadata and saw that this is a Sony camera, and therefore, I mean, a Sony lens, and the lens is a 16-70, which is an accurate statement. And the profile, Adobe made this profile to try to take out 2 things. The distortion, there's a little bit of distortion. You'll see it jump a little bit in the horizon. And the other thing it takes out is the lens vignette. So you'll see it lightens the corners because this particular lens, evidently, according to Adobe anyway, has some vignetting to it that we could take out. Of course, we can put that vignetting back in if we like, but we have that capability. So one of the things I'd like to do is change the. I'm going to go through this whole denoise feature that has more recently added to Lightroom, but in the old days, if you will, the old days meaning before I think it was May of this year. What we do, this noise up here in the sky. I'm going to hit the I key. This was an ISO 400, but this is a Sony A6000. It's an older crop camera. So it didn't do such a good job with the noise in the sky, even at ISO 400. But we can tend to get rid of that by adjusting the luminance noise. That helped it quite a bit. I don't usually go above more like 50, but that's 32. And then the color noise, we'll talk about more. I might even add a little more color noise, which at normal viewing dimensions, that helped it quite a bit, I think. But we could go through the denoise feature, which I'll talk about later in a different image. And one of the things I'd like to do to this image probably is in the finale here would be to, put some sharpening in it. And you can do that in this detail panel. I commonly have what's known as presets. So I've set presets over here. So by one click, I can add sharpening to my liking just by clicking on that. You notice it changed the sharpening amount to 45. It's a pixel radius here on the edges of 0.8, and the detail is 35. You'll find all kinds of different references on how to think about this, but these are the numbers that I've found works okay with me. And the other thing I would do is I don't want to sharpen that noise in the sky. So I hold down the Alt key and I can mask out the sharpening in the sky. So anywhere you see black, it's not getting sharpened. So I can adjust where the sharpening gets applied to the image with this slider here. By holding down the Alt key, I can see exactly where it is. So I'm not sharpening the sky, therefore I'm not sharpening that noise, but I'm sharpening everything else. Any questions about that so far?
Yes, how did you, when you said it wasn't sharpening the sky, how did you choose where you wanted it to be sharpened? I missed that.
Okay, it's a matter of holding down the Alt key
Okay,
and moving this slider here on, you see my cursor?
yeah,
I'm moving this masking slider. I move it to the left. It's sharpening everything. Everything is white. So
okay,
it's sharpening everything on the image. The more I move it to the right, the less of the image gets sharpened. So I don't want to sharpen the sky, but I want essentially everything else sharpened. So I adjust this slider until the sky is not sharpened. It's black.
oh, okay, I see
And you
that.
see all the white areas around the sails, all that gets sharpened.
Gotcha, thank you.
That's what I want.
Chuck, a question. You mentioned you don't like to use the dehaze, and at least here in Florida with so much humidity, especially shooting at a long focal length, it really seems to make some positive improvements. What is it you don't like about the dehaze?
Well, I probably overstated that. On certain images, dehaze can be quite useful, especially on images such that you define. I just don't find a use on it where you don't have that situation. And I'll show you where I use dehaze on an image that somebody sent in a minute. But dehaze can get, you can get really crunchy with a dehaze. It is a very powerful. Some people like that contrast. I don't. To me, it looks way too crunchy. It saturates colors as well at the same time. So you got to be careful of that. Sometimes when I use dehaze, I'll desaturate the image. I'll bring the saturation back down because it saturated the color so much.
That's a great idea.
By the way, you can reset any of these sliders by double clicking on the name. So you double click on dehaze, it goes back to the default value, which was 0. I think I had this up to about 6 or so. Any other observations on this image? I'll probably work on this thing a little more, but I don't want to take much more time. But the highlights on on the ship look a little too white for me, so we could get into masking, which we're gonna go to later. And we could bring down the exposure a little bit on that ship. But you get the drift of how I go through the flow, I hope. Let me show you another image and another approach. There's another way to get to these whites other than just looking at the image. You can hold down the shift key and double clicking on white. It brought that down to 0 to minus 100. You can hold down the shift key and double clicking on blacks, and it brought the blacks actually up, opposite of what we would normally do. So if you double click without holding down the shift key, you'll reset those sliders. Another way to look at this is you can hold down the Alt key and you see everything turn black. And the more I move up the whites, you can see where the whites are now overblown. So the idea would be you would want only a smidgen of whites. So you would increase the whites till, it looks like there's plenty of whites in this image in terms of the way it was exposed. And then hold down the Alt key and try to adjust the blacks, and you can see you can adjust the blacks to where there's only a certain amount of blacks. Looks like there's a lot of contrast in this image. You may want to bring the blacks up, but that's another way to look at it. Of course, nothing's any better than, looking at the image itself. Another way what I commonly do these days, I didn't used to do this in earlier days of the Lightroom, but my starting place is this auto button up here. I just merely click the auto button. And you can see, what happened to that image. You see it changed. The exposure went up, it added a little contrast. It brought the highlights down, put the shadows up. It brought the whites up ever so slightly. Remember, there was already whites there. It brought the blacks down. And so that already put some contrast in it. It also added some vibrance and saturation. I think I'd take this saturation back out because at least from my eye, it looks a little too saturated. It doesn't touch presence, but now you can go in and make any changes you want to make. It's a good starting point is my point. That it didn't used to be a good starting point. I never could find images that really worked well on years ago, but they've gotten better at the algorithm. The way I think about this, if you were to put a JPEG file into, Walgreens and you wanted a print of it, the Walgreens printer has an algorithm in it, and it looks at the image and it makes some color corrections and changes for you for its printer in order to print the image the best way it knows how. Well, that's all that Adobe's doing here with this auto button. It's got an algorithm behind the scenes. It looks at the image. It makes some guesstimates on, where the image should be in these sliders, and it gives you a starting point. It's that simple. But you can change them to your heart's content. One of the things it looks like in this image, it looks a little crooked to me. And that part of that is distortion of the wide angle lens, maybe. So you can click on the crop tool up here, and if you click on the outside of the image, you can straighten it, by rotating it. This may be there's still some distortion in the image, but this probably looks more like it. For my eye anyway. It does still look a little too oversaturated to me, but I may bring the saturation actually down. The tone curve is we already saw from whites and blacks adjustment, there's already a lot of contrast here. As a matter of fact, I think what I would do is bring up the shadows even more here, maybe. and bring up the black some before I go to the contrast. Any questions?
Chuck, I have a quick question. The tone curve, I've always wondered, and I've never looked it up. So it mentions highlights, lights, darks, similar to in the basic. And what's the difference?
It's the same thing.
Oh, it
These-
is.
These
Oh.
highlights are the highlights up here.
Oh,
Let me
okay.
show you see if I can. So when I mouse over this, the host histogram, notice on the histogram notice this slider, what gets
Okay.
highlighted. So if I hold my cursor here, notice, I wish I could add two cursors. If you look at what's this, where it says ISO 250.
Hmm.
Look at that right there. So when I mouse over here, look what it says. It says whites, right?
Yep.
And then when I bring it down, it says highlights. So this section of the histogram is highlights. This section of the histogram in the middle is the midtones, and that's the exposure. That'll move the whole curve, right? Exposure. That's what it's trying to tell you. By the way, you can click on this histogram and you can move the exposure, just by clicking and moving it back and forth. You can change the highlights by clicking on that section of the curve. Look what's happening. This is the whites part. Look what's happening to the slider underneath.
Right.
See that? So if you go to the tone curve, that section of the curve they call it sometimes a little something different because you're selecting a lot more of the curve. Here
Okay.
you've only got 4 here, whereas what do you have up here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they only have 4 regions. But remember, you can go to a point curve on this. Where's that point curve? There it is. So here's a point curve, and you can, fix that point there, and then you can bring the shadows down and bring the highlights up, and you can fix that point there, and you can bring this down. You got total control on a point curve on anywhere you want to put it in the whole histogram.
Okay.
It's a science in itself. I quite frankly have not gotten into that science as much as I probably should, but what I have done is I like being able to change my contrast by using these 2 sliders. I sometimes, these are shadows and highlights are the same effect on the histogram as shadows and highlights up here.
Okay.
But for some reason, this what called darks and lights, notice it's when you click over, you see it affects a larger portion of the histogram. And I've found that this is a more effective way to put contrast into an image.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, I've totally screwed up this image, so don't look at this and say, well, this is how he'd leave it. But by the way, there's a reset button down here. You can just go down and hit reset, and now you start all over. So, okay, I was going to get into some images that were sent to me. This is Scott's. Scott, are you on the phone on the Zoom? I don't know if he is or not. I don't know. This is obviously a sunrise that had a rocket launch in it somewhere. And this is what I ultimately did with the image. This is my edit of Scott's image. And I was going to try to run through this real quick because I've got about 4 of them to do here that people sent in. One of the things I observed on Scott's image right away, and I'm just going to turn up the exposure a little bit so you can see it. It's got, these are these dust spots I was talking about. The other thing on this image that is a distraction in my view, I'm going to bring it back down. If you see this circle right in the middle, this is probably from having a filter on a wide angle lens. This is a 16 millimeter to 35 millimeter lens, according to in the information I have up in the upper left hand of the screen. So, and I think it was taken at 16 millimeters. So a very wide lens, even if you have a UV filter on it, it will tend to pick up reflections from it, especially if you got sun shining in the lens, and it'll put some spots like that on. And if you have any dust on that UV filter, it'll make it worse. So my point is that since I'm going to be dealing with the sky, trying to get the sky lighter in my edit anyway, I want to first fix these things in the sky, which is kind of opposite of sometimes the flow. I like to use this tool called the healing tool. And one of the things you can do for spots in the sensor spots is you can use this feature called visualize spots. You see my cursor here, it says show or hide the spot visualization, and it shows you the key you can also select as a quick activation of that visualized spot. So I can check it and it turns, you see what if it turns everything black, and I can adjust the intensity of these visualized spots. But dust spots tend to look like little donuts when you're in this visualized spot mode. So I'm going to get rid of this one, and I'm going to make sure that the opacity is all the way up, because it's probably selecting areas that make sense. I want to make sure it selects something nearby. This is a spot. This is a spot. So I'm going to get rid of these spots. One, I can hit the letter A key. I can go back and forth and see if there's any other obvious ones. That's what I usually do. There's one way up here, very, very small one. A couple of them right on the edge, right? Here's one down here in the lower sky. Now that one I'm going to look at on the sky to make sure it, selected the right area here. I like to adjust it a little bit so I can move the adjustment around. Okay, we're going to now be on this mode, and I'm going to try to remove this.
Chuck, I've got one question.
Yeah.
I also use that remove tool, but I use the mode that's all the way over to the left.
That'll work. I like.
What's the
reason
difference?
the reason I don't like to use that often. I shouldn't say it's. It can easily be done exactly how you say. This one is called, what is it called? It's called the remove option. I don't like that one so much because I've seen it when it does its blending, it doesn't do it as well as this heal tool, in my opinion. It
Okay.
looks a little bit out of focus to me, especially if you use that tool in places that's not just plain blue sky. So I'm just in the habit of using this healing tool, and that's what I used to use all the time anyway before we had the remove tool. So that's what I usually do. But you could easily do it with that remove tool. Now notice when I selected this reflection here, it's duplicated this cloud, which I don't really want it to do. So I'm going to try to find another selection here. And look at that, we eliminated that reflection. Okay.
Yep.
I'm glad you're there, Scott. So I'm going to turn my exposure back down where it was. So this is the original image. We just removed that. And one of the things I'm going to do is, like I said before, I'm going to hit my auto key and see where that takes me. Now, one of the things about this image is that we've got such high contrast in it. In other words, the dynamic range, that is the brightness of this sun and the darkness of everywhere else, is challenging. So we don't want to blow out the sun too much, although anytime you take a picture of the sun, it's probably going to be pretty well blown out. but I don't want to overdo that. You know, one things I'm going to start with, lens correction, because this image looks like, to me, especially in the sky, looked like it had vignetting, and I didn't add any vignettes, and I don't think Scott did, because this is a raw image, so it's probably profile correction. So I can click that profile correction and look how it lit up the sky there, especially. So this is off, and this is on. So Adobe says this is a Sony FE 16-35, right, Scott?
Yes, yes.
And Adobe is putting a profile in here that corrected the, look at the middle of the image right there at the horizon line. Look at the distortion it corrected. And then what I noticed on the image is not the distortion, but I thought it was pretty heavy vignetted, and I wondered whether it was the lens, and it looks like it is the lens. I would also check chromatic aberration, although it probably would mean nothing on this image. Most lens you buy today already have chromatic aberrations built into the camera lens or the camera itself. And what you can think of is it's chromatic aberrations. If you ever see them, it'll be right along the edges of things like trees, and it'll be like a purplish fringe or a greenish fringe. It's just it's what happens in a lens and the camera can't resolve it. So the camera programmatically will try to get rid of those even before you see the raw image. And you can see this on Scott's camera. If I click on this information, it says, this raw file contains a built-in lens profile for chromatic aberration. The profile has already been applied automatically to this image. So it's already taken care of that. I don't see a case where the aberrations would happen on this particular image, but if you had a lot of trees in this kind of light, you might find that to be the case. So that helped that, but I wanted to show you one other thing here. If you look at the image, I'm going to go back to my exposure. I'm going to remember 0.81. I'm going to bring up the exposure a little bit more. I want you to look at what I would call the distraction in the very corner. I like this little girl. I don't like the couple got cut off down here. So I'm going to do that removal as well. I'm going to use the remove tool. I'm also going to use generative AI to remove. So this is going to go up to the Adobe website and help us process this. So I'm going to select these people down here with this tool. I'm going to try to be careful just to select the people and not go into the ocean, although they probably fix that too. So I select the people, it turns them red, I hit apply. It goes up to the cloud, does its magic, and removes the people. Easy. Almost unbelievable how it does that. So we got rid of that problem. The other thing I would do is I'd still enhance the sky somewhat. And so one of the ways I would do that is through a masking operation. I would click on this little tool here. I would select the sky. And it's going through its magic AI and selecting the sky. It selected the sky, and notice I already had it predefined as burn. That's not what I want to do, but I wanted to show you by mousing over this. Look what it selected. It selected the sky and a little bit of the ocean, which is okay with me, because what I want to do is try to increase the exposure a little bit and increase the shadows a little bit of that sky, maybe even bring the color into a different range. But I don't like the fact that it's selected the sun area here. I don't want to bother with that. So I can go up here to this mask and you can see I got the mask selected. It says you can either add to the mask or subtract to the mask. So I'm going to subtract from the mask. I got this pull down menu. and I'm gonna subtract a color range. So I'm gonna select color range. And notice when I selected color range, my cursor turns into this eyedropper tool. So I can click and drag on the eyedropper tool, and I'm gonna select these colors. So that subtracted it from the mask. So if I show you the mask now, there's not much red, but there's a better way to see this with the color range. Notice in my upper right-hand corner, it shows me the color I have selected, I've sampled, but I'm going to refine where that selection is. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and I'm going to run this slider back and forth. So where there's white, my changes will not take place. Where there's black, like black or gray, in a gradient fashion, my changes will take place. So I'm trying to get that sky up there, right? And all that is white down there where the orange is, so that's not being selected. And none of the beach is being selected, and the little girl's not being selected. Or is being selected, I should say. It's black, but none of that white is being selected. So I'm gonna leave it about, I'm gonna put a little more gradient in it. Remember, I'm holding down the Alt key, moving that slider back and forth. So now my mask, if you will, I'm hitting the O key, I can see my mask is in that sky. It is affecting the sun far less. So now I can do things with this sky, brighten it a little bit. I'm going to add a little contrast to it, to the sky. One thing you can do with sky, especially if you're trying to emphasize the vapor trail there, is you can add a little clarity, if I can find it. Here it is, clarity. You see the clarity coming up, right? So that's how you can use masking in order to select certain areas and do local adjustments. I might even bring the highlights down a little bit in that sky right above the orange. See that? That makes sense?
Yep.
The other thing I find a little distracting here is I go back to the crop tool and I straighten this horizon. So here's a case where, in my view, Scott may not agree with me, in my view, the horizon should be straighter anyway. And I would straighten it up more like this, because it does two things. It cuts that bottom off, which is really not part of your story. I would probably move it over as far as I can. And there's one other thing I would do with this. I would bring a linear gradient in, and all this shadow area here is going to be pretty blue. Why is that? Because, you know, the colors in shadow areas are blue. So I'm going to try to increase the exposure some here, but I'm going to change it to, I'm going to warm it up down there a little bit. Probably not that much. And then one of the things I wanted to show you on this thing, I have this, so I've essentially dodged this, meaning I've made it lighter, but I have a control amount up here. I don't have to go through all these little sliders. I can change the amount of my application of that, all those sliders with one slider up here. So I would probably put this more like at, 80% or so. Make sense?
Yep.
And then, so you want to, so this was, so I can hit the backslash key. This is Scott's original image, although the crop tool doesn't show the crop tool. This is what we ended up with. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to take a short break here. And then I want to get into two more images. We're going to go through quicker, three more images, four more images we're going to go through quicker that got sent in. The next one is D. Sarter's. This is her image. And so let's take a 5-minute either potty or coffee break. And we will come back in 5 minutes. That is, to my watch, it'll be 10 after 10, and we'll get through the rest of these. Fair enough? For those of you that are watching this after the fact, you will just have to fast forward through this 5-minute break. Thanks. Okay, we're gonna start back. Anybody with me?
Yes.
Well, that's good. This is Dee Sarter's image. Dee, are you on the line?
I am. Good morning, Chuck.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm good.
I want to
Enjoying
go
your
here.
presentation.
I want to go here. Is this Iceland?
It is, yeah.
Oh, this is unbelievable. So,
Unbelievably challenging to edit, which is
well,
why I sent it to you, Chuck.
this is what I did with it.
Uh-huh. Nice.
I don't know if you like it or not, but look at it again here. I may even bring the contrast down just ever so slightly on on today's look at it anyway. But I really like the image, and so the fundamentals, what I did to it. First of all, I just hit the auto key and started there. I added quite a bit of clarity, and to Mark's point, I did add dehaze to this. So if you took the dehaze back out, I'm dehaze. Look what it does to the sky. You remember the original image? If you look at the original image, it is really milky up there in the sky, but I think this probably more reflects the sky in this image. I think I actually made it I changed the white balance to a little bluer, which brought that bluest in the sky. But as to Mark's point, you can kind of take that haze out of there. I don't put much in there. I only do like, if I go above 10, I'm wondering why. And in this image is probably 6 or 7, I would leave it at. I don't know what others think. But the other thing I did with this D is I took and I selected a couple of things. I selected the sky, I brought the exposure down, I brought the highlights down, and I looked how much more I brought the temperature down, -17. So I really blued up the sky for you. I'm not sure that's real, but it certainly makes the image for me. And then the other thing I did was try to add some clarity to all these rock or ice formations here. And I increased the highlights because it was so milky before. See that there's very low contrast here, and that's probably reality when you took the image. But we're trying to show that contrast in, I think, at least for me, in the image, all that ice there. And so on the ice field, what I did is I increased the contrast somewhat. And like I said, I may have overdone the contrast some, but I increased the highlights, increased the whites, and down here on clarity and texture, look, I even put a little dehaze in that whole ice field there. So let me show you where I did it. So you see the red area, that's where I painted in, highlights, whites, clarity, texture, dehaze, because I think that's the hero here on this.
Chuck, can you separate the red area between the ice in the foreground and I'm gonna call it the bank of the glacier? You have it all highlighted in one
Yeah.
right.
Absolutely. I could brush that in 2 different masks. Sure. I brushed it all. Looks like I missed
So
some.
if the bank wasn't quite as blue, I think it would look more realistic. You know
Which
where
bank? This bank here?
yes.
Okay. So, we can easily, by the way, you can, I took that brush. I can click on the brush. I'll make sure. I can look on the brush, and if I hold down the Alt key, it turns it into minus. So I can, take that away.
Okay.
So I wanted to see some clarity in that whole field, but you're the artist here, so
Um,
I'm gonna take it away
my
there.
yeah, my opinion is I like the clarity. It's just a little too blue.
Okay, well, we can also change that. Is it still, let's see, let me take this off of here. Is it still too blue, the ice field?
No, the ice field's gorgeous.
So
That's exactly how it looked.
this right
But
here is that too blue? Because I blued up the sky, remember? All this sky
right,
area.
well, yeah, the sky was more as it was shot,
Yeah,
and so was it was very milky, very overcast day,
yeah.
flat light.
But, you certainly you could, not make it, my view of the world. Remember, I brought the temperature down so I can bring this temperature back in normal and it makes it gray. You see that? I brought the temperature down. So maybe we ought to bring it down ever so slightly rather than so blue the way I had it. How's that? Is that better?
I think so, but more real. I'm kind of a realistic. Uh,
Well, if you take your original image, one of the things I did is
well, not that realistic.
the one thing
Not when I'm going to hang it on my wall.
I cropped
but
it 16 by 9 in order to make it a panel, more of a panel.
okay,
That's I thought that would be a better crop for this. I didn't think you needed all that sky there because here's your heroes here, but that's just my
yeah,
thinking. It's like I said when we started this whole ball game this morning, my way is not the right way. It's one way. So
I
Chuck
think I
and
took the
Dee,
sky down even more.
less blue.
No, cropped it lower. And I believe I took out the people that you highlighted
Well, I like the
and showed
people.
for scale, which I liked. Yes, I do
Yeah, I
like
like the
them
people
being
there.
there. Yeah,
But if you look at the crop, I mean, you could take the image out, but then you either lose some of the people or some of your ice field, in my opinion. But look at the crop overlay that I have here. This is a golden mean, meaning this is 3/8 and versus 5/8, every one of those lines there. And so I cropped it down with that crop overlay in mind. You see where I'll call this the horizon, the ice field
okay.
horizon is right there. So I kind of liked it because I liked your foreground's like 5/8 and the sky is 1/8 or 3/8, I'm sorry. And so to me, that made
I
the
like
right
it.
crop.
I like it, Chuck.
But like I said, I'm not the artist here, and it's just what I saw in the image. So, any more questions about?
yes, this is Richard. I look at that picture and I see black and white.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you asked that question, Richard.
Oh yeah, flip it, Chuck.
Well, one of the things you can do in Lightroom, remember we said Lightroom is a database and it doesn't touch your main image. So if I were to go to Dee goes to her computer or goes to my computer that I brought it in at, I've got an original image sitting there, but I can right click on this image down here at the bottom and it says create virtual copy. So I can create the virtual copy. Now I have a new copy. Remember, it didn't add to my database of raw images. All it did is add another card in that catalog file in Lightroom. So I have two images one copy that I made the color corrections on, and one copy that now is a duplicate of that. So now I can go up to my basic panel and my so-called profile, which I neglected to talk about earlier. I can click on this, and now I have all these options, including, you know, pure monochrome according to Adobe. I got color, I got according to the camera matching. You know, I can be neutral, standard, but I can go down here and Adobe has built in all these black and white options. So you can go through and select, you know, black and white options and see the ones you like. I tend to like, you know, I can't remember, I think it's, you know, you could just go through here and figure out which one you like. I think I like the first one to start with better. You know, here's one with a blue filter, green filter, red filter. I think I would start maybe with black and white one. So now I've selected that and I can close this. So now I've made a black and white image and I can go in here and, you know, I can do a color mix on the black and white image. So I can look at, let's look, imagine there's blues in here somewhere. So I can make changes of the blues by changing the blue slider. What I'm really doing is I'm toning the image in black and white, which is common for Silver FX Pro or any other black and white converter you do. So this may not be the right converter for some people, but there's a black and white image. We did that in how many seconds? What do you think, Richard? You're the black and white expert.
Let me unmute. I like it. I think it the original is just such a shade of blue. I think it's a little distracting. The black and white really gets you into the whole contrast.
I think I may even add a little more contrast to this since it is black and white. I don't know. There you go. That's something. Another thing you may want to consider, D, and I don't know if you want to do it or not, you know, the birds are real. I like leaving them in there, but some people may say, well, you should take this one out and this one out, but that's not a school where I'm coming from anyway.
I did notice you left them in, Chuck. Yes.
Yeah. I might take this little branch sticking out here out around the edge, but I kind of like the birds. It, you know, it kind of tells a story, but I would definitely leave this one in, the one with the
Yes.
leaf spread.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you wanted to take those two out, you could, but that's your choice. I don't know. What's others think about that?
This is
Okay.
Rob. I
They
like
kind of look like dust spots. I think the smaller ones would do well to take them out, and that little branch at the bottom.
Yeah, you could. All right, I'm going to move on.
Thank you, Chuck.
Lisa Bonner sent me this image. And, you know, this is what I ended up doing with it. So how did I get here? Obviously, there's a pretty big crop here involved to try to fill the frame. Lisa, when I take wildlife, I do the same thing. I can't seem to get them, you know, fill the frame with them because I'm usually too far away from them. But, you know, I wouldn't consider this a problem at all, because if you look at what you got left here, even after the crop, we're talking about 3,800 pixels by 2,500 pixels on the side. Certainly big enough to do almost anything with, even with that crop. But in addition to, you know, hitting the auto key, I changed quite a bit to Mark's benefit, and he caught me on it. I actually used dehaze again. But I brought the highlights way down. You know, this is this image was taken in pretty flat light. The good news is there's all the detail is there in the whites of the bird, which is really great. Look at that. So what I did to the image, besides doing the global adjustments, is on the bird itself, I brought the highlights down because I was trying to get the exposure up, and I brought the highlights down on the bird. I also added a lot of clarity and a little bit of texture to the bird itself. So if you look at the bird, I've got, I'm talking about the entire bird. So I selected the bird by selecting the subject. So that's part of the options on this new AI masking tool. You can select subject, and you notice right between the beak here, it didn't quite select it well enough, and you could take a brush and try to get that out. I didn't bother, but that's certainly possible. But the whole bird got a little clarity. It's got the highlights came down in order to better define the bird. I also did a little brush effect on the eye. I brought the exposure up on the eye, trying to bring that highlight up a little bit. I didn't bring it much, but I brought it up a little bit. And then I took a hold of the whole background here. So this is a background mask. And let me show you what the background looks like. So I selected the whole background. I had to brush out some areas because it selected part of the bird as a background. So I had to brush out, on this mask. But on the background, I brought the exposure down ever so slightly, brought the contrast down, because remember, our eyes will go after contrast. So if you bring the contrast down, that'll make that, help make that background disappear, especially all those seaweed back there. And I did make the temperature ever so slightly bluer. Why did I do that? Because I'm trying to differentiate the color of the bird versus the color of the background. And since it's all whitish, I'm trying to make the background bluer and the bird warmer. And warms, we were attracted to warm light. We think warm light is closer than cool light when we look at things. So I'm trying to get that bird to pop off the background, if you will. So I turned the background ever so slightly. I mean, if you turn it too much, it won't look natural. So I brought the temperature down a little bit, and look what I did with clarity and texture. Totally opposite of what we've been doing. I brought the texture down, I brought the clarity down, and I brought the sharpness down. So I'm trying to get that background out of focus more so that everybody calls their attention to the bird.
Okay.
I put some contrast in it with my tone curve like I normally do. And I put some sharpness in it. What do you think, Lisa?
Oh, I like it a lot. I actually did a version of it, but to make the bird pop, I went with a more darker sand, but I like this much better. And that's why I sent it to you. I was trying to figure out what would you do with this sand, because it was so.
Yeah, the sand is, I guess this is a local shot, right?
Yeah, it's down at the inlet. I was down with a friend of mine, and it was actually a cloudy day. It turned out to be not the day I wanted to be shooting, but I said, you know what, I'm just going to go for it and see what I get. And that was about the only thing I got out of it.
So what's the story behind that? Did some fishermen leave all these little fish around, or?
Yeah, they just had dumped it on the ground out there somewhere.
Huh.
And he was out there because at first I was trying to figure out, was it fish or was it like sticksy? Because he was going around picking up sticks and things thinking, and then he ended up right there. And I was like, well, I'm just going to try it. But
so this is one version.
The noise, the denoise on that at all, or? I think I did.
I didn't go through the denoise feature, but I'm going to show that in a little bit. We'll see what, I got to look at detail. No, I didn't change the noise. I did sharpen it. Do you think it needs noise reduction? Let's see. What was your ISO on this? 1800? I don't find any objectionable noise in the photo, even at, maybe a little bit on the bird, but Boy, at viewing angles, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's bothersome, but certainly you could add some, you could go through denoise, or you could just add a little bit of luminance denoise here that might help a little bit on the bird, but I don't see any appreciable noise on it that at least bothers me.
Okay.
Of course, by default, there's the color noise is set at 25, and I just left it. So anyway,
Yeah, I
Okay.
still like what all this means. So thank you.
that's what I did with it. And this one is Curtis's. I think it's yours, right, Curtis? You sent it in.
Yes.
So this is what I did with it. In addition to hitting auto, I did crop it into a 14:11. I didn't think we needed all this sky here. I thought this was the story you might have been trying to tell. I left all the sign and everything in there because that may be meaningful from a document point of view. But in addition to the normal things we've talked about, clarity. Here we go, Mark. I'll use dehaze again. In order to try to get a little more saturation, I believe is what I was using in it for, a little more contrast. Dehaze is really mid-tone contrast, but it's like it's like clarity on steroids. And I put a little bit of contrast in the whole image, but really the thing I wanted to show about this image is I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out this moon. So I used the masking function. I selected an object, so that means you can have a tool and I can actually select the moon. And what I was happiest with is look at the color changes, the white balance changes I made to the moon. I brought the temperature way down. I was trying to get it more white. And remember if you look at the actual white balance of this image, I'm going to go back to it. I actually cooled it off a little bit when it was shot. It was shot and it looked like a cloudy day, I guess. So it was sitting at 7,300. And I brought it down to a little bluer, cooled it off a little bit. But what that did to the moon, even though it's reflecting sunlight, which might be somewhat warm at night, at least in my view, the moon looks more white in the sky. I don't know if everybody else feels that way, but so I brought the temperature way down to bluish, and I brought the magenta way down because it looked too warm to me, way too warm. And this is what I ended up with. So that's how I adjusted the image.
Yeah, I see you.
Any comments, Curtis?
Yeah, I think it looks good. You also removed that something on the lower right, the light.
Yeah, this when I cropped it to, I'm going to show you on your original image. When you crop it to 14:11, I selected it here. I brought it down, so I'm trying to 14:11. I did bring in this side a little bit, but I didn't totally eliminate. That's about where I brought it in. I didn't totally eliminate that. I guess this is a light streak or something.
Yeah,
And so on the image I edited, I just took that out with the remove tool.
Okay, yeah, I like it.
So that's what I did with that. But in this type of light, remember your camera's going to capture what, at least on a white balance, if you've got an auto white balance, it's going to capture what it sees mostly in the scene. And that may not be good for, something like a moon. And I don't know what others feel. I'd like to hear your feedback, but a moon in I guess a blue sky, a dark blue sky or night, it looks more white to our eye, I think anyway. So that's what I tried to make it. Okay, next image, Mary Jane Patterson. Mary Jane sent me this. Mary Jane, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, this is, and Mary Jane was saying, oh, I hope you can do something with his dark face. And I said, yeah, well, I think we can. This is a JPEG image. And one of the things I wanted to point out to the JPEG image is when you have a, let me take Curtis's here. On the profiles we went through, remember when we changed to black and white, this is a raw file from Curtis. You've got all these camera modes here. So I can select let's see, what is this? This is a Nikon, right, Curtis? This is a Nikon camera, I think. Notice I can select when I select the profile, I have Adobe Color, Adobe Landscape, and you can go through these and change, what you think is best color-wise. I left it on Adobe Color because I thought that best represented this image, but you can go down here to Camera Standard. This is what Adobe thinks a Nikon camera would do for Camera Standard or Camera Vivid. You can go select these. Now, if you have a JPEG image, you're kind of locked in. You can have color or monochrome. That's it.
Yeah, I have to shoot in RAW and I keep forgetting because when I shoot continuous, I used to do JPEG and RAW, but then I shoot continuous and it takes forever to catch up.
It's not a problem one way or the other in my view, Mary Jane. I shoot JPEG sometimes, especially at these events, because I don't want to edit all these images. But it's not. I just didn't want people to find where all my profile settings. If you shoot in JPEG, the camera sets the profile for you, and it comes into Lightroom, and it's either you can change it to monochrome, but that's it. That's all the flexibility you have. So this is what I did with this image, Mary Jane.
Awesome. Yeah, it was his hat.
Yeah, well, there's a couple things I did with it. First of all, I just, you're complaining about the face being dark. I just took a brush and let me select that and I can show you what I did. So I just brought the exposure up, the contrast up a little bit. I brought the shadows up. I was a little nervous about bringing it up too far because I wanted to look as natural as possible. And notice I also selected the shadow around his face.
Okay.
You see the red area here?
Yeah.
So if we just focused on his face, I didn't think it looked natural at all. You want to bring that shadow up around him, like if there was something reflecting light back in his face, then there's got to be something reflecting light back around his neck here in the shadow, right?
Right. That makes sense.
So I selected that as well in the brush. I brought the temperature up. I warmed him up a little bit because remember, shadows had bluish tint to the light, even these kind of shadows, although what we're trying to simulate here is something like maybe all this rock formation that he's standing on is reflecting light back up into his face. That's what we're trying to simulate. And then his hat was very hot. Let me show you the original image. You see how bright his hat is?
Right.
It makes sense. The light's coming from overhead, right? This is real harsh overhead light. So I brought the hat down. I brought the exposure down and the highlights down. I brought the temperature to bluish, more blue, trying to match more of his jacket. And that's about all I did to that.
Oh, it's great. I love
Actually,
it.
I changed the white balance. Yeah, I changed the white balance to a little more blue.
Looks good. Thank you.
I have a
So-
question.
Have to do it.
Sure.
This just brings to mind a photo that I have that I haven't been able to fix. If there was something on his face, say a tree limb or something, a leaf or something, how would you just remove that?
Well, I'm gonna First of all, one of the things I wanted to say is in order to, you can increase this magnification of the photo by hitting the Z key,
Okay.
or you can just, if as long as you don't have any tools selected, you can just hit. You see there's a plus sign here. You can just click on it. I like using the Z key, but I'm going to try to use. This is what I probably ought to do for me more often, but because of my wrinkles, I like using this heal tool. You can use generative AI, this remove tool that generates AI and remove almost anything. You saw how we removed those
Yeah.
people in the corner, right?
We
But-
didn't have that when I took the photo a few years ago, but now I was just thinking about how to remove, it was a, like a little leaf in front of her face, and I wanted to remove that.
Yeah, it may be possible with that generated, especially if it's a pretty complex, a leaf going across.
Yeah.
But if there's something on a person, I will take this tool, like say if we wanted to try to remove this fold in his chin there, I can use this tool, but then you would say, well, that's not natural, because what's this man's name, Mary Jane?
Eddie,
I'm
Eddie.
sorry, Benny?
Eddie.
Eddie. So this is not Eddie, but we can make a version of Eddie that's, by bringing down the opacity a little bit.
That
And I
sounds
still
great.
have that fold there in Eddie's face, like you should see the folds in my face. But it's not so pronounced, right? So I got this opacity slider I can use. So let me show you. There's before and there's after.
Oh, I like it. Can we
And
do
it looks good because it's still there, but it's not as pronounced. So
Right,
yeah,
so
nice.
don't forget this opacity slider on these healing tools, that you can do things like this, and that wouldn't apply to a leaf necessarily across somebody's face, but I was just going to show you, I don't, there's nothing here across his face that I can really deal with, but
Okay, I think I kind of got the idea.
you can get the idea. And this generative AI remove tool,
Yeah.
by the way, if you're using that tool, it would be important for you to make sure you select the shadow in addition to whatever you're trying to remove, because
Yeah.
it doesn't work very well unless you do. So anyway,
Thanks.
couple other quick things I want to show you. This was at our portrait session that John Buck did. Somebody was shining a gold reflector up into her. I thought it warmed her up way too much. I think I had auto white balance on my camera, but I wanted to show you a trick that to try to get your white balance at least in some ballpark. To me, this is way off. It's got way too much magenta and it's too warm. I don't like it. But one thing you can do is pick up this tool here, right above the white balance tool. If you see my cursor, I picked up this tool. I'm going to focus in on her. 1 second. Let me get her. Let me get her in the center. There we go. Okay. So I've zoomed in on her. I picked up this white balance tool, and I'm going to go into the whites of her eyes. And I'm going to click on it. And that gets me closer to where I am, where I want to be. It's now too blue, so I'm going to warm her up a little bit more. Right? I've got to change exposures. And there's lots of things I did to this image, whitened her teeth and that kind of thing. But I just wanted to point out to you, this tool you're supposed to pick up, and you're supposed to be able to click anywhere where there might be a gray, And one of the things you can do is go to the whites of her eyes and, get you a white balanced starting place anyway. That's really all I wanted to say about that. I can show you what I ended up this image with. This is how I ended up the image. Notice I cropped it a little bit. One of the things about distractions, I found this in the lower left corner. Found this post distracting. I don't mind the post in this image so much, kind of a leading line, but I didn't like that ending there. I wanted to end it off of camera. One other quick,
How did you white her teeth? Was that just a mask or?
yeah, that's one thing I can show you is that, Lightroom comes with these. I mean, you can do it yourself by going to the tool. It's detecting people. Notice the little circle going on. Hang on. So I can click on her. And now I have all these capabilities. I can select just her teeth. See her teeth is red. I can select just her lips. I can select her iris and pupil. I can select her eye sclera, which I didn't know that's what you called the whites of your eyes until Lightroom. I can select her eyebrows, her body skin, her facial skin, and I can make mask on these on all of them. So as an example of her teeth, I can create a mask. And then I have a preset that I call Whiten Brighten Teeth. And so let me show you before and after. So that's before. That's after. You don't see hardly any difference, but probably coming across Zoom. But so I increased exposure a little bit and I desaturated the teeth. And look at what I did to the temperature. I brought the temperature down. Why is that? Because teeth that are yellowish are warm. You want to do the opposite. So you make them a little bluer. And so you can go through and I did that on the final image here. If you look at all the masks I did things on, you could see all the masks here, all those little dots are things I did something on, including the background, made the background darker. Changed the color, put a little more brightness in her eyes, changed her teeth color, etc., etc. So you can do that. Let me try to get a couple more things in here. Here's an image where I started out. This is the image I started out with. This is Krista Robin. She's a chiropractor in Cocoa Beach, but she's also been a model of both the Camera Club and mine a couple of times. She's likes to longboard surf. This is the image I ended up with. I made it what I would call maybe even too Instagrammy, if that's a word. But what I wanted to show you in this particular image was the tools that are known as color grading. So this is the image without the color grading at all. I think I selected her and I warmed her up and tried to make her pop a little more. But you can go in and you look at this panel here called color grading. I'm going to show you individually. So the shadows, you see what I did to the shadows? I actually warmed the shadows up. So look at the foreground. You can see these are shadows. You can see they're nice. They're really warm. And I can do that by changing this. I can change how much color I put in that, how much saturation I put in, or I can change the color of that foreground by going around and around. If I do any of this, which I rarely do, but if I do any of this, I tend to do this where the shadows are warmed up. And if I show you the highlights, the highlights, which is the sky, is blue. So I can move this around. You can move the sliders or you can move this circle, but essentially this is an image which, like I said, I rarely do this, but once in a while I will try to play Instagram master and do some color grading. I happen to like it on this image. But you know, many images, it just doesn't work in my opinion. But now notice, you know, we did some cropping and we moved some people on. That was the original image. We wanted to make sure we tried not to blow out the background, which made her and the subject dark. But you know, with all the tools we talked about today, you know, you can generate something like this. Any questions about that? One more trick I wanted to show you was a tool called Transform. There's a Transform section of the Develop module down here. You know, one of the things you can do, and often works, you just hit Auto and it tries to straighten it up for you. It does a fair job. You know, this is what it tried to do with the image. You might have to come back in and straighten it to your liking, but that's not for this particular image. Oops, it's not what I want to do. For this particular image, and this was an attempt for that Nancy tried to do when she was trying to do her that industrial theme we had, but I think she literally had her iPhone stuck out a camera, a car window. But you can see it's, you know, because of the wide angle, the transform is, I mean, it's really off, if you will. And if you tried to straighten it in the crop tool here, you know, you see what happens there. You still got this smokestack going wonky, if you will. So one thing you can do is you can use this guided feature, and when you click on guided, there's a tool here. You see what I did is I took this tool and I drew a line. I said, I want this straight. You see that line, that little white line there? I wanted that straight, and I also wanted this straight. You see that? So I drew those two lines, and I clicked, you know, by clicking on guided, and that's what the image ended up with. So you can straighten things up by just drawing the lines on the photo and using this guided tool.
Is it actually doing that without cropping?
Well, I cropped the image first, but yes, I'm doing it without cropping. There's a constrained crop. So if you did that and then put some white areas along the edge, you could click this little box here and it would constrain the crop for you. I cropped it ahead of time because it was so far away. I started with a crop and then I straightened it. She ended up not using the image, but I thought it was a good example of using this guided section here. Another thing we already talked about was removing, look at I'm almost embarrassed of the dust. I changed this lens in the field and I think I got so much dust on it, but we talked about that, and Scott talked about, you know, he tends to use this remove tool, which you can use to get rid of dust. You know, it works just fine. And make sure your opacity is all the way up or it won't remove it. And remember, if you hit the A key, you know, you can see all through this visualize spots area, but we talked about that pretty much. So hit the A key again and it turns off that visualize spots. The noise tool, we talked about dehaze, pardon me, we talked about denoise. It's in the detail panel here. Notice the noise in this in this image. It has got a lot of color noise in it. This was taken at the Ponce Inlet field trip we had. And let's see, this ISO's at 25,000. You know, it's real dark inside. So, you know, it has a lot of noise in it. So Adobe recommends you denoise things before you start anything else. I'm going to do this backwards here, but you can essentially click on denoise. And here's an example where this doesn't do a virtual copy. It's going to, if you denoise the image, it's going to actually create a new image, and it's going to have enhanced in it's a DNG file, and it's going to enhance. But it says it's going to take 5 minutes to do that, so I'm not going to run through it. But you can see this. You can see this preview here. I want to especially show you in this with all this color noise here. This is what the image is going to look like after you click this enhance, and according to this, wait 5 minutes. So here's before. That's what the image, the noise would look like at 25,000 ISO. And this is the Adobe denoise feature. There's a lot of plugins you can use to denoise to the same extent, maybe even better in some plugins. But the fact that we now have this tool in Lightroom, it's like, I mean, I'm not afraid to shooting images at 25,000 ISO anymore. Let's see, one other tool, last tool that I wanted to show you was this new feature they have. This is an image that's been developed of Nancy. We were recently in the Keys. There's something called lens blur now. It's another panel in this develop module. So you simply click apply, and it tries to analyze your image, and much like portrait mode on your iPhone, it will try to add a blur in the background. So it's still analyzing. There we go. So you can change the amount of blur. Notice how all that blurred out back there. The one I like is this 5-blade. It says it's commonly seen in vintage lenses, but I like that. Sometimes it's a little overdone for me, but you can change the amount. By the way, you can change the focus range down here, both the width of the focus range and where it is putting the blur in place. And you can change the amount. If I use it at all, I tend to bring it down. It seems a little overdone to me quite a bit. But, you know, that's where I would leave it. And like always, any changes you make, by the way, there's an eyeball right up here on the panel. So you can turn the whole panel on and off. So I can turn lens blur on and off by holding down. So that's the original image. And if I let go, I turn the eyeball back on, wait for it, it'll put the lens blur back. So what any other questions we can talk about? I think I'm done.
After you've finished with all of your adjustments, where do you save your photo to? I find out sometimes I've used Lightroom and then I can't find my photos anywhere. It says they're not there. So I'm not putting, do I put them in a folder?
Clara, were you here at the very beginning of this talk?
Yes, I was. So that's
Okay.
what you do?
Hang on one second.
Okay.
Let me get back. Hang on one second.
No problem.
Let me get Lightroom back here. Okay. So remember this discussion here. Lightroom is nothing more than a catalog of changes you made. So Lightroom does not change the picture in any way, shape, or form when you import it into Lightroom. It goes out and looks on your disk, finds a smaller copy of that, it brings it into Lightroom, and it records all the changes you made in this something called a Lightroom catalog. So to
Right.
see the changes on your image, you must look at the image in Lightroom. And the only way to save those changes on your image where you're going to put it out somewhere, like on social media, you need to go through this export process. And the export process is right here on the library module. Remember, we can do import or we can
Right.
do export. It's down the lower left. Look at my cursor here. You can either do import or export. You've got to do an export. I'm going to click on export. It brings up this panel and you have to export it to a file location of your choice. You have to fill out this form. You have to say it's in JPEG. You have to say how big you want it, either resize it or don't resize it, et cetera, et cetera. And you hit the word export and it'll put it in this file location that you have
Okay,
already selected.
thank you.
But if you want to go see your changes without having to save your changes in a separate file, just go back into Lightroom. They should come, all your changes should come right up because it's already in your catalog, if you will.
Good,
Good
thank you.
question. Any other questions?
Claire, this is Cheryl. One of the things I found is if I move a photo outside of Lightroom, say I had it in XY folder and then I moved it to AB folder, Lightroom will give you that message. So if you're going to move a photo, move it inside Lightroom because then Lightroom will recognize it.
Good point. And that brings me to another point. So if I remember, here's my folders over here on the left-hand side, and let's look at all the miscellaneous folders I have, miscellaneous photos. Obviously, somehow I got these images that people sent me into my Lightroom. So how did I do that? I actually put them into the miscellaneous folder using my operating system. So somebody sent it to me on email. I downloaded the image. I put those images into my miscellaneous photos that I had already created in Lightroom. And now I can come into Lightroom, I can right click on miscellaneous folder, and I use this function called synchronize folder. I push synchronize folder, and I purposely left 2 images that people sent me there so I could show you this. I forgot to show it to you. Synchronizing keeps your catalog up to date with the latest changes you've made to your photos in other applications. So it says there's 2 photos in this folder on my operating system that Lightroom doesn't know about. So I hit the word synchronize. What's going to happen? It's going to go and show me those 2 photos that I did not bring into Lightroom. And what do? Well, both of them are checked. I can add keywords. I can hit the import button. So my keywords were Lightroom Workshop. And this came from Scott, I think. I think this one's Curtis's. And so I can import it. And now they appear. They come in, and guess what? Now they appear in Lightroom in my miscellaneous. There they are. There's Scott's. Does that make sense? So what was said was, if you want to take this beach photo and you say this doesn't belong in my beach image, you go to this grid view, you grab the center of this thing, and you can move it anywhere you want, just like you do in your operating system. See that? You can move it to any folder you want. And so that is the way to move your images around if you want to in any one of your folders. Do not do it in your operating system because Lightroom will lose track of where they are. And if you have somebody that sends it to you on email, Well, go ahead and put it in your operating system, but use the synchronize function that we talked about. So right click on any of the folders. So if in my case, it was miscellaneous photos, but recently we went to the keys and Nancy took several pictures on her iPhone and she sent it to me on email. I put it in the keys folder. I right clicked and I hit synchronize. And I brought them all into Lightroom. Does that make sense?
Hey, Chuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Gordy here. That last thing that you went over when you said just if you wanted to move it from one folder to another, do it in Lightroom. And you said you just grab it and drag it over there and drop it into the folder you want to move it to, correct?
Correct.
When you say grab it, you mean left click and hold with the mouse? You don't mean right click, right?
Correct.
Okay, so a regular, just grab it with your left click on your mouse, grab
Yeah.
it, move it over there and let go.
Yeah, see this grid view here? You can
Yeah.
tell what there's a lighter
Right.
frame
I
around on anything that's selected. And
Right.
even if you selected multiple, and let's say I selected all three of these, I could click in the middle of any of them and I can move all three of those to any folder here. See
Okay,
that?
it moves them.
It moves them and it'll give you a warning. It says, you sure you want to move these? You say, yes, I really want to move them. And you hit OK and it moves them. It
Cute kid, by the way.
physically moves them on your disk drive.
Okay, that's good. Cute kid,
Okay.
by the way.
So you might say, well, wait a minute, I didn't import this correctly and I want a different folder under 2024. Right click, guess what? Right down here somewhere, you can create folder inside 2024 photos. How about that? So let's say, oh, this photo I really want in a totally separate photo folder. I don't want to import it again. Okay, right click on 2024, create a folder inside 2024, name the name the folder the way you want it. It'll appear here on the left-hand side and in your operating system, by the way. Then you take the image you want and you move it into that folder wherever you want. The point is, so Lightroom, remember, it's a catalog. It's looking, once you orientate it to where your photos are on your disk drive, it'll lose track if you start moving them around in your disk drive. And I can't tell you how many people I've helped try and they can't find their photos because they moved them on the disk on their operating system. They did not use Lightroom to move them. Make sense?
Yeah. Hey, Chuck, one of the issues that I struggled with is I have a external drive that I'm keeping all my photos on, and I have it set to include subfolders, but I'm not seeing all the folders that are out there. Apparently, I'm only seeing something I've created recently. Any idea? I'm on a Mac.
Well, in Lightroom, do you see the top level folders?
I see like my passport for Mac, so I see that folder, and then underneath it, I only see a couple of folders that I had created.
Okay,
I don't see.
let me share again. I should probably keep sharing because let me share.
And I thought maybe it was a security thing, so I went to the settings and I set the folder security so that.
Well, there may be some security conflicts that might help. But remember on the import, remember when we have, I'm going to take my memory card out of my reader just so on the import, when I click on import, you can click on the source over here, right? Mm-hmm. So you can go to any disk drive. It should show you every disk drive that is on your operating system. So you could open a disk drive, like here's a disk drive, my C drive, right? And none of these files are going to make photo sense, but you can go and look at every single folder Well, and once you click on one that has photos in it, notice what it's doing. See at the top here, it's adding. So it's going to add that folder to Lightroom. See that?
Yeah, I do.
So there's sources up here. So don't put the memory card in because it's going to think it wants memory card first, right? But you can always add a folder that's sitting on that has images in it now on your operating system. You can add that folder to Lightroom, and by going through the import function.
Okay, that makes sense.
Another way you could do that, I'm going to get out of this. Another way you could do that is if there's a top level folder somewhere, which we did this on one of the persons I helped. You right click on the top level, you still have synchronized folder here, right? So you can see all the images that are on your top level folder, inside your top level folder. And remember, there was a check mark we could put on the import function that says, show me all the subfolders. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
So you should be able to do a synchronize. You may not want to do that because maybe you don't want all those images in Lightroom. But if you want to do a folder at a time, just use the import function and do it, and add that folder to Lightroom.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Good questions. What other questions? I didn't want to hold you too long, but I'll be here as long as anybody has questions.
The only other question I had, Chuck, was on the denoise function.
Yeah.
You have the,
that Mark caught me on. I said, don't use it very often, and I use it on like 4 images. So
on the denoise, not the dehaze, but the denoise.
Oh, okay.
You have the slider for how much to denoise. Is there any tips for whether to stay at 50 or go up to 100, or how do you kind of determine how much?
Let me get back to that image. See if we can look at it. I've denoised that image before. Let's see, where are we? Got to get back down here. So here's this image here that had all this noise in it. I'm going to hit the D key, and we saw all the noise in the image. And if I go to the detail panel, you see I've already played with manual. There's 2 different thinkings here. One is this manual reduction, which you have these sliders, right? And one of them is this whole denoise, which creates another image. You know, that Adobe, this is like having a plug-in where you're totally going through the image and denoising the whole thing. The only good news is about doing it in Adobe, it keeps, if you had previously done any editing to it, it keeps all those edits to the new image that comes in, which is good news. But notice this has color noise in it. You see the color noise? It's, what is this, green and red, and I don't know. It's got a lot of color noise. You can experiment with these sliders, and I can take out almost all of that color noise. Matter of fact, a good deal of it just by cranking this up to 26. The difference is when you use these sliders, you're tending to put more softness in the image. Look, the aluminum slider I've already had cranked up to 51 or 52. The denoise feature is like a plugin. It goes through the image and supposedly through AI recreates some pixels for you. Now it'll still soften the image some, but it won't soften it as much as these sliders, at least to my eye. But if you can say, hey, I can get rid of all the color noise just by cranking this up to 25, then I go back and look at the image in full scale, and I said, really, that did it for me. I don't need to go through the denoise function. Don't go through it. It's really your choice.
Okay, yeah, and I was just wondering, when you click on that denoise function, it has how much to denoise. And
I've
sometimes
learned,
I'm wondering if I'm denoising too much.
Yeah, well, you can look at the image. Remember, this image here is supposedly a artist rendition of what's going to happen when you click the button.
Mm-hmm.
You can see there's a lot. If I bring this down, I've got a lot more clarity to the image. Now there's more noise, but I got a lot more clarity. If I crank it way up, you see how soft it gets. So you can make a judgment, based on this preview, if you will, about how much. I've always used somewhere between 40 and 55. I tend to not go over 55 because, remember, this preview, you're looking at least 1x, it may be even more than 1x. And, what you really want to do is you want to eliminate the noise at normal viewing magnification.
I may be overusing it.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to leave it under 55, but
Okay.
you use that preview to estimate how you want it, and then, as a matter of fact, you can do it twice, right? You can denoise it. I didn't like that. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to start all over again and denoise it again. So,
Cool. Thank you.
real easy. Good question. What else? Gosh, crystal clear, huh? Okay. I've kept you too long anyway. Appreciate everybody showing up.
Thank you, Chuck. This was very informative.
Did everybody learn something?
Oh,
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, definitely.
I never know if we keep doing these or not.
Yes, please.
I would like to see one on presets.
On what? Presets?
Presets. Have you
Yeah,
done-
I didn't do too many presets. Presets you can, I think what Lisa's referring to is in the develop module, you can put some develop presets, like, if you always sharpen an image the same way, which is what I do, at least most of the time I do, you can set up a preset in the develop module just by clicking on the plus sign next to the word preset. And then you get to select there's a whole check sheet that comes up and you get to select. So you can select only sharpening and you can call it a name. So for instance, in my case, I might call it sharpen scenic version or portrait version. And then I would say, how much is the sharpness? Is it 65 or is it 45? Those are the two numbers I typically use. So I can set a preset on that. And so I don't have to go through the sliders anymore. I just click on that preset and it sharpens, and you can do that on anything. You could, we can do it on whitening of teeth. I did a portrait shoot for my niece's daughter, and I thought her, at least in the light we were in, I thought her teeth were a little white, a little yellowish. And I wanted to whiten them up, but I didn't want to whiten them up to my normal preset. It was been too white. So I reset the sliders and I made a preset called Emily's White Teeth. And then every photo, then I could select all the photos and click on it once, and it went through and found her teeth in every single photo and whitened her teeth the way I wanted to white Emily's teeth, just by clicking that preset. So those are things that that's something I'll stick in my memory bank. But what I tried to cover this time was importing. There was a lot of confusion on importing the last couple of times I did this. I will make sure we spend some time on presets the next time I do it.
Oh, this was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And if anybody has any questions, ever, I've been known to work for coffee. We can meet at a Starbucks or whatever. And
There was a question in the chat, Chuck. I think you may have touched on a little bit. It says, can you process iPhone images? I think you touched on it, but
you definitely can. I do the way I process iPhones photos is I import them just like I do a memory card in most cases. In 99% of the cases, I'll even put my wife's phone in. I plug it into the computer, and then when I do that, click that import, it recognizes the iPhone. Now, one observation on the iPhone, probably not any phone, it takes a long time to render the photos in the import window. So when you click on that, you could probably go get a cup of coffee before it renders all the images that are on your iPhone. The main reason of that is because you usually have 200 or 300 images on your phone, I would guess. And so it's trying to render all those thumbnails, but that it'll work and you can import them just like a memory card. It's really no difference. It finds all those photos on your phone. I do it all the
There's
time.
also a Lightroom app that works really good too, that you can download that Lightroom app on your phone and
App.
process it on your phone. I've
Yeah.
done that.
Yep. I should say that's a good point. I think that was Cheryl, right? Cheryl?
Yes.
Said that. The as a part of this is a script, you're looking at Lightroom Classic today. That is a subscription service. I pay $9.99 a month for the service, which I think is well worth it because they really turn a lot of changes. I mean, this masking function now, it's just like unbelievable, the power they put in Lightroom for this. And when I don't play golf, so I figure I'm saving a lot of money, by 120 a year. But what I was going to say about that is in your subscription service, you get access to be able to sync collections up to the cloud, up to, I forgot what the limit is. I think it's 5 gigabytes. So you can create a collection, which I do all the time for events that I do. So that I showed you an event that I do for charities. I'll shoot their event. I'll put it in a collection. I'll sync it to the cloud. I give them the link and then they can look at all the photos in that collection. And all that is included as part of your subscription.
Hey, Chuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned $9.95 a month or whatever it is. I pay the same thing, but my understanding of it is that price went to those who elected the subscription model at the very, very beginning. I think if you're not currently a Photoshop Lightroom person and you try and subscribe, I think it's more than that.
Really? I didn't know
I
that.
think, again, I'm going by vague memory cells right now, but I think I remember when I signed up for it, they said, sign up now for $9.95 a month and we'll never increase your price.
Oh.
I think it may be more expensive now if you're just starting off, because I think that special is gone, but I'm not positive. Just
Yeah, I don't know.
warn everybody that price may or may not be still applied.
Well, mine's $9.99 because I just got billed. I don't know what it is. It actually Scott Kelby did that also. I signed up for Scott Kelby Learning for $99. I don't know, so many years ago. And he said at the time, if you do it now, we'll never increase your price. And sure enough, he hadn't increased the price. So I'm still paying $99 for Kelby as well. Anything else? Well, I appreciate everybody. I'm gonna stop recording here.